Happy New Year, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed the holidays, and to celebrate, I figured it would be a good idea to quickly go over every game that I beat in 2022. I think this will help give you a little bit of insight into what kind of gamer I am. While a good majority of these games have been turned into videos over the past year, not all of them have, so you might see a few random games pop in. This list will also not be in any particular order. Now, it should also be noted that this list of games is the games that I saw the credits for or beat the main storyline. It doesn't mean that I 100% completed every game. While that is the case for some of them, it is not the case for all of them. Now, with that out of the way, let's see what I beat in 2022. This is one of the few games I played right when it released. I'm honestly not someone who typically rushes out to get the newest and latest games, but if there is a company I typically do it for, it would be Nintendo, and the Mario + Rabbids franchise is one that I really enjoy. The revamped combat system in the game gives the player way more freedom to attack the enemy compared to the previous game, and I think it's a great improvement on the turn-based tactical system that has worked for so many games previously in the genre. Along with the bright and colorful visuals, the good writing, and the cartoon quality cutscenes, I think it's a shame this game seems to have dropped off from so many people's minds when it comes to great games released this year. This was the remaster of the PS2 game that I played on the PS4. In the game, you go on a quest to defeat the 16 Colossi. Each giant has a different puzzle that must be solved in order to take them out, with some being as simple as climbing them and stabbing, while others can only be damaged while in vulnerable positions. The game manages to show off scale like very few games before it. It really gives the player the feel of David versus Goliath, and it makes the player feel like they can take down anything when they see the giant monsters fall. While I did feel as though the game had some issues with the camera controls, I was able to look past it for the most part because the great puzzle action aspect of the game was extremely engaging. Boss fight after boss fight with very little to do in between is a great gameplay loop that keeps the player eager to take on the next challenge. LEGO games are some of the best pick up and play games and some of the best co-op games, and since Marvel is a franchise that I really enjoy, it only made sense for me to give the game a shot. I played LEGO Avengers entirely co-op, and it was a blast. Mostly following the stories from the movies in the MCU, the game recreated familiar moments and set pieces, and it was a good time all around. I played this on the Xbox One using local split-screen co-op, which is a feature that is sorely missing in a lot of games these days. So if you're looking for a game to play on the couch with your friends or kids, be sure to check out the different LEGO games. One of the greatest games of all time was also one of the games that had always passed me by until earlier this year. I would always get a headache while trying to play Super Mario Galaxy when the game first came out. Trying to control Mario as he ran upside down on a planet just never really clicked with me, but this time I decided I would power through and see what the fuss was all about. And I'm glad I did. Throughout the game, you're going to find some of the smoothest 3D platforming created, along with some amazing level designs. I actually played this through the 3D All-Star Collection on the Switch while using a Pro Controller, and I think it was a fantastic way to play the game. Even though I have my doubts that they will, I am hoping that Nintendo decides to bring Super Mario Galaxy 2 to the Switch at some point in the future. Growing up a Nintendo kid, there was a lot of franchises that passed me by. Of course, I knew lots of people who had the other systems, and I got to play a lot of games like Halo 3, but one game I didn't play until 2022 was the first installment of Gears of War. Right from the very first game of the franchise, they managed to almost perfect the cover shooter system. Along with the chainsaw gun and interactive way to reload your weapon, the game was able to still stand out all these years later. And if this is a game that has passed you by, you can find a used physical copy for extremely cheap, or you can play it on the newer Microsoft consoles through Game Pass. This is a game that I've beaten multiple times now, and every time I do, I have a blast. The first time I beat it was on regular difficulty, then second time was on a new file on ultimate difficulty a year later, and finally, after spending a little bit of time away from the game, I decided to get the final trophies by beating New Game Plus. When I really like a game and I know I want to play it again, I'll usually wait a while before re-beating it in order to give myself a reason to revisit a game I truly enjoy. And right from the first time you take control and swing your first web, you can tell just how smooth the game is going to play. Performing 50 hit combos, swinging across New York City, and taking out some of Spider-Man's most iconic foes, this game is a great time every time I play it. Death's Door, which I played on the original Xbox One through Game Pass, is a smooth playing action-adventure game. The game has some great characters, smooth gameplay, and some great visual contrast. The dark and dull color palette that is regularly used throughout the game can be an unappealing visual at times, but when you see a healing plant light up in the corner, it gives this wonderful contrast on the screen. Showing the bright sides of life in an otherwise dark and gloomy location is a great visual treat. The game also has a fantastic combat loop of using your melee attacks to replenish your ranged ammo. This prevents you from playing the game using only one method of attack way too often, and it really helps keep the combat from getting stale. One of the main selling points to the Super Nintendo Classic is the inclusion of the previously unreleased Star Fox 2. While the game isn't overly long, it has some very interesting gameplay mechanics, with missiles attacking you in the overworld area. While you can tell this probably wasn't the full complete version of the game, it is substantial enough that you can see all the different ideas they had planned out if they did a full retail release for this sequel to the fan favorite game from the Super Nintendo. The very first game I beat in the year of 2022 was Kirby's Epic Yarn for the Nintendo Wii, and I played it through the backwards compatibility of the Wii U. The game was a cute and fun platformer with a great visual aesthetic. Although the game was a little bit easier than I had hoped, it made up for that through its creativity. Being able to use the fabric within the levels to your advantage is a great concept, and if you're looking for a cute platforming game that should give you very little stress in terms of difficulty, then this could be a good game to try. This is a game that I beat with every intention of making a video for, but for whatever reason, I just couldn't put my thoughts together to make a cohesive video. That being said, I think this is a wonderfully fantastic game. With interesting characters, interesting combat, and interesting choices to make, this game has quite a lot of things that people tend to look for in a game. Playing this game the first time, making whatever decision I wanted to in the moment, was a great way to play it, but my second playthrough, doing a pacifist run, was where the game really shined. Your decision on who lives and dies makes a difference, and it's a great experience. There's a reason why the game has always been talked about in such high regard. When this game was first revealed, I had no idea what it was about. But I hadn't found a Series X or PS5 at that point, and there were very few new games that wasn't from Nintendo that I was able to try out. So when it was added to Game Pass, I decided to give it a shot anyways, and honestly, I really enjoyed it. With puzzle and collecting mechanics as well as fascinating looking creatures, it keeps you wondering what you're going to encounter next. Will it be a flying ice cream sandwich or an apple crawling around the beach? You'll need to uncover the next location to see what crazy creatures are living in the area. The gameplay loop is rather satisfying and keeps you searching for the next creature. I did also beat the DLC Isle of Big Snacks, which was pretty much more the same, but with larger monsters. And honestly, I think it was a missed opportunity to create a dinosaur-themed location called Dino Snacks. To the creators of Bugsnax, there you go, you can have that idea for free. This was actually my first foray into the infamous franchise, and while I now think that's a shame because I've missed out on the others, I think this was a great first experience. One of the most visually striking games I've played on the PS4, the game also features some really interesting upgrades and powers for the player to use. Absorbing a neon sign and using that energy as a weapon is extremely satisfying, and really makes me curious about the previous games. The game also has a morality system, allowing you to choose what path your character will take, giving yourself good or bad karma. I think it's an interesting wrinkle into the game. It could have been a fun game without it, but with its inclusion, it's just one extra layer for the player to consider. To spare a person or not, that is the question. I don't know about you, but I got tired of waiting to find out if Nintendo was gonna actually release Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp. Now, I understand why they delayed it, but it was a game that I was really looking forward to. So, because there still is no official update from Nintendo, I decided to get Advance Wars 1 from the Virtual Console store on the Nintendo Wii U, and playing this game on either the TV or using the gamepad is a fantastic way to play it. The turn-based combat is something that a lot of players seem to think is an outdated game mechanic, but personally, I think it's something that will never fully go away. It allows the player to consider all possible outcomes of a move before they do it, in a similar fashion to chess. I think it's a great way to play a game when the goal is to outmaneuver an opponent. Each scenario gets increasingly difficult, and needing to pick and choose what type of soldier or vehicle to create to take out the opponent is a really good time. In a year with God of War Ragnarok, Elden Ring, and 2 new Pokemon games, one of my most anticipated games since its announcement was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge, and this game definitely did not disappoint me. It was basically everything I had hoped for. I love side-scrolling beat-em-ups, and from that first trailer, I was hooked. The visuals and level designs were great. The co-op capabilities were great. The smooth combat and callbacks to previous games were great. And I beat the game in one sitting the day it was released, and it was great. Not every game needs to be a 70-hour epic open-world adventure. Not every game needs to be a single-player experience that distracts you from everything else in life. Some games just need to be fun and put a smile on your face. And if you're a fan of the Ninja Turtles, then this game should absolutely do that for you. Speaking of two new Pokemon games, the first one released this year was Pokemon Legends Arceus, and this game was something that I was really intrigued by. Being tasked with creating the world's first Pokédex was a fascinating idea, and having it set well before any other game in the franchise was a gamble, and I think it paid off. The game also changed up the well-established formula for how to catch a Pokemon, and I think the new method worked really well. Being able to accomplish tasks without needing to be fully stopped, engage in combat, and then resume your task kept the flow of the game going at a really good tempo. While I did see the credits for the game, I actually didn't complete the Pokédex as I did find it a little tiresome needing to complete certain tasks for some of the Pokemon. But for the most part, I think it was a really interesting new take on the franchise, and I'm extremely curious to see what they do in the future with this style of Pokemon game. The Uncharted franchise is one that I binged right at the beginning of the first COVID lockdown. I beat Uncharted 1, 2, and 3 in a row without any other games in between, and I hadn't played an Uncharted game since. So I decided to see what Chloe and Nadine were up to in this side game for the franchise, and honestly, it was a really good time. The combat was smooth, the dialogue was decent, and the puzzles were interesting without being overly simple or complex. As a single-player experience, I think everyone who has played the main Uncharted games but skipped the side game should give it a shot, especially if you've had an itch for another game. Along with the single-player story, I actually really enjoyed the online multiplayer aspect of the game as well, and at the time at least, had a thriving online community as I was able to find a game every time I looked. Now, every gamer of every age has some classic games that have passed them by, and while I never had an Xbox to play Gears of War, or playing Super Mario Galaxy gave me a migraine when I was younger, I used those as excuses to not play those big-name games. But I had no excuse for missing Metroid Prime. A decent chunk of my life, I had access to a GameCube and a copy of Metroid Prime, and for whatever reason, I just never gave it a shot, even though I really liked Metroid Fusion as a teenager. So I decided to finally play through Metroid Prime on the Wii U through the Metroid Trilogy version for the Wii, and I get why so many people consider this to be a fantastic game, because it is. Even though playing on the Wii version meant pointer controls, I think the game played relatively well. The pointer controls made it fairly easy to look at an enemy in an instant. However, the trade-off was that I felt it made the platforming rather difficult. Simple platforming seemed to be no longer simple, as it was rather difficult to gauge just how close you were to an edge. Jumping from or landing on multiple platforms in a row was more frustrating than it probably should have been. But that doesn't take away from the good that the game has, which allows it to be considered a masterpiece by many. Speaking of games that are highly regarded, It Takes Two, the 2021 Game of the Year, was a fantastic co-op experience. The sheer creativity that went into every level is absolutely astounding. The dialogue between May and Cody was extremely engaging, and the story of the game is something that can resonate with the vast majority of players in some capacity. The game is a puzzle platformer that is probably the best story-driven co-op experience I've ever had. I was continuously amazed at the creativity that was regularly on display. Moving from one of my favorite genre of game, the 3D platformer, to one of my least favorite, the interactive film genre, I played Erica on the PS4, and honestly, I was rather surprised by how engaged I was with the game. If you want a game where choices matter, then this is absolutely that game. Now, it doesn't have traditional controls, but what it lacks in gameplay, it makes up for in story and replayability. The game is essentially a live-action movie where you can either choose certain dialogue options or actions for Erica to take, and each decision can drastically change what is going to happen next. While a run-through of the game can take roughly 2 hours, after that first playthrough, you will have missed a good majority of the game as essentially every scene has multiple potential scenarios to play out, leaving you curious about what you've missed. Even though I typically don't like this style of game, I went into it with an open mind and ended up doing multiple runs out of pure curiosity. This is a near perfect remake of the classic game that started the franchise. There's upgraded visuals and controls, as well as fantastic quality of life improvements. The original Metroid is one of my gaming shames. I've still never beaten it, and I've tried multiple times, but it was just so frustrating because I haven't memorized where to go for everything. But the quality of life improvements to Metroid Zero Mission allowed me to get completely hooked into the game, and once I started, I basically never wanted to stop. It allowed me to finally experience the beginning of the franchise, and I think anyone who struggles with how bare bones the original entry is should absolutely consider Zero Mission as a substitute. Assassin's Creed is a franchise that had mostly passed me by. I tried the very first game a few years ago and it just never really gelled with me, and I've tried a couple since, but I was scrolling through Game Pass and decided to give Origins a try as I knew it had a different formula compared to the original games. This is the stereotypical map game that people say they tend to get tired of. Place a marker on a large open map, run to it, do the mission, then place a new marker, and do it all over again. And while there is nothing inherently wrong with that gameplay loop, while it does get rather repetitive, I found playing the game for no more than 2 hours at a time really helped keep me from getting too bored with the formula. This is a game that I played a little bit basically every day for multiple months, just doing 1 or 2 missions at a time. This is what I played when I was taking a break from working on a video, or what I played for an hour after I got home from my day job. Personally, I really enjoyed the setting of the game. It has a ton of weapon variety, it allows you to play extremely stealthy or slash your way through enemies, and there's a ton of side quests, leaving you with a ridiculous amount of content. 3D Kirby. This is something a lot of players have been waiting for a very long time, and it definitely did not disappoint. There is so much to love about the game. Along with the colorful visuals, smooth gameplay, and fun power-ups, the game has one of the best difficulty curves I've experienced in a very long time. The game is also a great experience for players of all ages and skill levels, and I can see younger kids really enjoying the minigames that are located in town. Nintendo is known for family-friendly games, and this is a perfect example of that. And if they decide to keep going with 3D Kirby games, I hope the next step in the evolution is straying away from the fixed camera and relatively linear level designs to a full 3D Mario Odyssey style level design. Easily one of my most anticipated games of the year, and one of the few games I bought on release day, Horizon Forbidden West was a fantastic experience, but I was pretty sure that was going to be the case before even trying it. I really enjoyed the first game, and the second is a good next step for the franchise. It did everything a sequel should do. It expanded the combat, the new robotic animal designs were fantastic, and the set designs were absolutely amazing, and it even expanded the story and character arcs. I think it's a shame that the game was overshadowed by some other big name games released this year because it did basically everything right. The one knock I did have with it is that there was almost too much dialogue. I did find myself not picking every dialogue branch like I did with the first game, but in terms of actual gameplay, it was a great time, and I think it's time I head back in, this time on my PS5 for my New Game Plus playthrough. If there's one game on this list that can be considered a hidden gem, it would be Tinykin. I don't think I've been this pleasantly surprised by a game in a very long time. I decided to give the game a download on Game Pass and see what it was about after hearing about it on a couple of different gaming podcasts, and it turns out to be a 3D platformer with zero combat, a ridiculous amount of collecting, and Pikmin-like puzzles, and I was hooked. The movement with your skateboard soap bar was great. The quick references to pop culture franchises like Star Wars or Titanic was super engaging, and the lack of combat with focus on puzzle solving and collecting was a welcome change of pace from the vast majority of games being released these days. But the best decision that they made, and the one that kept up the flow and pace of the game, is the fact that the game automatically uses the appropriate Tinykin every time you throw one out into the world. If you throw a Tinykin at a wooden crate, the game will automatically throw an exploding Tinykin. You do not need to go into a menu and switch it to the appropriate type, and that kept the game and exploration from dragging on. If the player needed to manually switch every single time, it would have felt like switching to and from the Iron Boots and the Water Temple of Ocarina of Time. Extremely tedious. Every time I play a top-down 2D Zelda game, I have a blast, and yet before this year, Minish Cap had passed me by, so I decided to give it a try. And this is probably one of the more underrated Zelda games. The combat works incredibly well, the visuals are pretty good for a Game Boy Advance game, and the gimmick of shrinking to a minuscule size worked really well in terms of how and why it's used. The one issue I had with it was the character model shrunk so much that it was really difficult to see, so the developers added in a bubble out of necessity for the player. I played this on the Wii U Virtual Console, and mostly on the TV, and I still thought it was small. But the use of the gimmick in terms of puzzles and hidden entrances worked incredibly well. The dungeons had some good layouts, and the boss fights had interesting puzzles you needed to figure out, and overall, I think the game is a really good time. One of my favorite game franchises that I don't talk about nearly enough is Spyro. Spyro 2 from the Reignited trilogy is a game that I played through solely for myself. I never planned on making a video or talking about it on the channel. Sometimes you just want to keep things for yourself and enjoy gaming as a hobby without thinking about making content, and this was one of those times. The visuals in this trilogy is amazing, and I really loved the way they upgraded all three games. Running around as Spyro, collecting the gems, and taking out the enemies is always a fun time. As you can tell, I play a lot of platformers because typically, I find they always have what I consider to be the most important quality for a video game, and that's fun. There's a simple joy to games like Spyro, and I can always find time for these style of games. The most recent full release that I beat, Pokemon Violet, has a ton of issues, from glitching the camera through the ground or a building, pop-in, and frame drops. This is far from a perfect game. But that being said, I do think there's a lot of interesting features and fun to be had if you're a Pokemon fan. Finally giving the player a wide open map to explore really made it feel like I was going on my own Pokemon adventure. Seeing the new Pokemon and getting the badges at my own pace and in my own order was a welcome change of pace for the franchise. The issue with the gameplay is that, to an extent, I did still feel like I was funneled into certain directions. Having level 20 Pokemon and going to certain locations, while you are allowed to go there, was a big waste of time as it was completely underleveled. So I did feel like there was a suggested path to go along. But as I got my team to a higher level, I purposely changed directions and went off the beaten path just to see if it would work, and I felt like I had no issues. The graphical and frame issues is probably going to stop me from finishing the Pokédex, and I definitely won't be doing any shiny hunting. But it didn't stop me from beating the story, seeing the credits, and going through most of the post-game stuff, which I'm still slowly working my way through. In recent weeks, I got a PlayStation 5, just like so many others during the holiday season, and the first game that I made sure to play was Astro's Playroom. This is a perfect tech demo for a new consumer. It shows off the abilities of the PS5 and especially the DualSense controller. With every level designed to make use of a different feature of the controller, it always kept me engaged. And the fact that it's a 3D platformer definitely was a bonus in my mind. There's a lot of fun jam-packed into this roughly 2-hour experience that I think everyone should give it a try if they can. Motion controls, adaptive triggers, touchpad, it's all in the game and it all works incredibly well. It's the type of game that makes me really excited for the upcoming PS5 exclusives because I want to see what they can bring to the table. 28 games. I know for some people, this is a lot of games, and for others, it's not even close to what they've played. But seeing the credits in these 28 games was an extremely enjoyable year of gaming for me. While I could have rushed through some games to make time for a few more, I always prefer to take my time, have my fun, and get the joy from the game that the developers are trying to bring to the player. Playing games from all three major companies, third parties, new releases, and retro games, no matter where you look, there's fantastic experiences all around. And be sure to let everyone know some of the games you beat this year down in the comments. Give us your favorites, your hidden gems, your must-plays. The more recommendations we can give each other, the better. And Happy New Year of Gaming, everyone.